Hello everyone, welcome to Enkindle Kids Learning. Today we will be studying 5th chapter of 6th Science NCERT, that is Separation of Substances. Believe me guys, it is such an interesting chapter. You have to watch the video till the end to understand it thoroughly. So let's get started. First, we will look at some of the examples. Every morning when your mother makes tea, they use the strainer before pouring the tea to the cup. You almost every day see this. Why is your mother doing this? Because they are separating the tea liquid from the tea leaves. They are separating a useful component, which is that tea. We drink tea, isn't it? From a non-useful component, that is tea leaves, because we don't eat tea leaves, we throw them away. Separating tea leaves from liquid with the help of a strainer is the first example of separation where we have separated a useful component from a non-useful component. Next, we will look into our second example. Have you ever seen this at home? Churning of curds or continuous stirring of curd? Why the curd is continuously stirred? Because we get makhan and lassi by continuously stirring of curds. This separation is done to separate two useful components. We use both makhan and lassi. We eat makhan and we drink lassi. Hence, it is separated by continuously stirring of curds. Now, let's look into a third example. What is this? This is a wheat plant. Plant from which we get our wheat flour. Basically, this part of the plant has grains in it, and this part of the plant is called stalk. After harvesting the wheat plant, we separate these grains from the stalks. Why we do this? Because we eat these grains. By grinding them, we get a wheat flour. And this stalk or straw are fed to animals. It is used as animal feed. This is how grain is separated from stalks of plant. Now, let's take one more example. This is a bowl of salad, and your mother wants you to eat all the vegetables. But if there are some vegetables which you don't like, what will you do? You will pick up veggies which you don't like and eat rest of them. What did you do here? You have separated non-tasty food from the tasty food. This is also separation. So, we saw many examples where we do separation in our everyday life. We have also understood that there are many reasons why separation is done. Now, we'll look into these reasons in broad. Let's move forward. Why do we separate substances? The first reason is to separate harmful substances from a mixture. For example, separating stones, insects from pulses or rice. Second example is to separate non-useful substances from a mixture. That is, Straining tea leaves from tea. We already saw this. Next is we also separate two useful components if we want to use them separately. For example, separating lassi and butter by churning curd. So, these are the three reasons why we have to separate substances. Now, we will look into different methods of separation. There are various methods by which separation can be done. This is very important and you will have to study all of them. Different methods of separation are, first one is hand picking, second one is threshing, third one is winnowing, fourth one is sieving, fifth one is sedimentation, sixth one is decantation, seventh one is filtration, and eighth one is evaporation. Let's study these methods of separation in detail. First one is handpicking. What is handpicking? It is a separation method used to remove the unwanted or harmful substances from a mixture by using your hand. What you can see here, you can see dal grains with some of the impurities. Under handpicking method, I'm able to separate the unwanted or harmful substance from a mixture by picking up these impurities with your hand. Isn't it simple? You might have seen your mother doing this, isn't it? This is called as hand picking. So what is it? It is a separation method used to remove the unwanted or harmful substances from a mixture by using your hand. Here you can see a mixture of black and green grapes. Can you use the method of hand picking? Yes, I can use this method to separate the black and green grapes. Okay, now I have a question for you. Can hand picking be used to separate all substances from a mixture? Confused? Let's look into this example. What is this? Mixture of salt and sugar. Will you be able to separate salt and sugar from this mixture using hand picking method? No. You will not be able to separate salt or sugar from this mixture by hand picking. Why? Because the two components in this mixture are very small in size and it's practically impossible to separate them using this hand picking method. When hand picking can be used? Hand picking can be used only when size of impure substance is large. If it is small like salt or sugar, it is impossible for us to separate the impure substance using our hand. And the second point is when the quantity of impure substance is less. Only if the quantity is less, it is easy for us to separate the impure substances. If we have tons and tons of rice with impure substance, is it possible for us to sit and remove the impurities out of the tons and tons of rice? No, it's not. So now we know hand picking is not possible if the size of impure substance is small or large quantity of impurity is present. Let's move forward to our second type of separation. That is threshing. What is threshing? Process used for separating grains from stalks. We already discussed this. After harvesting the wheat plant, they are dried in the sun for few days. Why? For drying of the stalks. After that, there are two methods of separation. If the quantity of the harvest is less, then it is separated by beating the stalks manually. You can see here the farmers are beating the stalks manually to separate the grains. And if your harvest is more, then you will have to use the machines. So this is called threshing, the process used for separating grains from stalks. Let's move forward. The third method which we are going to study is called as winnowing. What do you mean by winnowing? Winnowing is a method of separation used to separate heavier and lighter components of a mixture by wind or by blowing air. This is used by farmer to separate husk from grain. You can see the small coverings around this, right? These are called as husk. Do we eat this husk? No, we don't eat this husk. We only eat the grain which is inside this husk. By the process of winnowing, we separate the grains from the husk. Grains are the ones which we eat, whereas husk is used as fodder. So, winnowing is a method of separation used to separate heavier and lighter components of a mixture by wind or by blowing air. We will look into this method in still broader way. Can you see this picture here? Here, a woman is standing on a raised platform. She's got a mixture of grain and husk. Suppose this is the direction of air. When the woman tries to drop the grain from a height with tilted container, the lighter particles, that is, in this case it is husk, it is carried away by the wind, whereas the heavier particle, that is in this case grains, will settle down and form heap. Husk which is lighter will be carried away by wind, whereas grains which is heavier will settle down and form heap. By the process of winnowing, the mixture of husk and grains is separated. That is, a lighter and a heavier component is separated. Now you will understand the definition of winnowing. That is, winnowing is a method of separation used to separate heavier and lighter components of a mixture by wind or by blowing air. Let's move forward with the next method of separation, that is sieving. Sieving is a simple technique of separating particles of different sizes. This is used when components of mixture have different sizes. Let's take an example. You might have seen your mother doing this almost every day before making chapatis. What happens during this time? The finest particles from this particular wheat flour will fall onto this particular bowl, whereas the impurities, which are slightly bigger than this atta, will remain on the sieve. This can be used only when the components of mixture are of different sizes. In this picture, you can see the sieve is used to separate the finer sand particles from the larger stone particles. The finer sand particles will pass through the sieve, whereas the larger stone particles will remain on the sieve. By these examples, you now know that sieving can be used when the components of mixture have different sizes. So this is all about sieving. Next, we'll study about sedimentation. What is sedimentation? When a heavier component in a mixture settles after water is added to it, the process is called sedimentation. Here you can see soil and dust particle present in the water. If we allow it to settle down after some time, these particles, impure particles, will slowly get settled down. After some time you can see the soil and dust particles have settled down. This process is called as sedimentation, where the heavier components in a mixture get settled down after water is added to it. Moving forward, let's see the next method of separation, that is decantation. What is decantation? Decantation is the process of pouring out the clear upper liquid without disturbing the sediments. It is also used to separate two liquids that do not mix with each other. In the earlier example, we saw the sand and dust particles had settled down in this water, right? So, by pouring this particular liquid, that is the water, to other container without disturbing these impurities is called as decantation. It can also be used to separate two liquids that do not mix. Here, oil and water are the two liquids which do not mix. By pouring out this oil into the other container without disturbing the water is called as decantation. Which is the next method of separation? That is filtration. What do you mean by filtration? Filtration is a method for separating an insoluble solid from a liquid by passing it through a medium, often filter paper. It is used to separate pulp and seeds from the juice and cheese and paneer from milk. What do you mean by filtration? Let's take an example. Here, let me take a mixture of solid and liquid in a beaker. Now I need to separate the solid and liquid. What will I have to do? Let me use the method of filtration. For this, I will take one more beaker with the filter funnel, place the filter paper on the filter funnel and pour this liquid solid mixture into this. The liquid mixture gets collected in the beaker, whereas the solid particles will remain on the filter paper. This particular method of separation is called as filtration. This is also used to separate pulp and seeds from the juice as well as cheese and paneer from milk. The next method of separation is called as evaporation. What do you mean by evaporation? The process of conversion of water into its vapor is called evaporation. This is used to separate a solids dissolved in liquid and also to separate salt from salt water or seawater. We have the solution of water and salt. How will I separate salt from this water? To separate salt from this water, the solution is heated to boiling point for the liquid to evaporate. When I heat this particular solution, the water gets evaporated, leaving behind the solid particles of salt. This method of separating a solid, that is salt, dissolved in liquid, that is water, is called as evaporation. In this example we saw it is used to separate a solids dissolved in liquid, that is salt from water. It is also used to separate salt from salt water or seawater. How is this done? Let's take a look. First, seawater is allowed to stand in shallow pits. Water gets heated by sunlight and slowly turns into water vapor through evaporation. In a few days, the water evaporates completely, leaving behind the solid salts. Common salt is then obtained from this mixture of salts by further purification. This is how salt is obtained from seawater. So in these instances, we saw the separation was done using one method. Now we will see how the separation is done using more than one method. Let's take an example of separating sand from salt. For this separation, first what you will have to do? You will have to take the mixture in a beaker and pour water to it. Once when you add water, the salt gets dissolved in the water, leaving behind the sand getting settled down. This is called as sedimentation. After the sedimentation process, you will have to separate the liquid from the solid. You can do this either by decantation or filtration. What is decantation? Pouring out the liquid without disturbing the impurities. Or filtration, that is separating the liquid from the solid. Once you have done this, you will be left behind salt water. Now how to separate salt from water? For this, you will have to take a kettle. Add the mixture of salt and water into this kettle and turn on the heat. Once you turn on the heat, the water from this kettle gets evaporated. Place the metal plate over the evaporated vapors. Make sure you place ice cubes on this metal plate. When the evaporated vapors reach the metal plate, it turns into liquid. This process wherein conversion of vapors to liquid is called as condensation. What is left in the kettle? Yes, the solid particles of salt are left behind in the kettle. This is how you separate the salt from the water. So in this example, we used more than one method to separate salt and sand. That is, first salt, sand and water by the process of sedimentation and filtration or decantation, we got sand separated. Then what was left behind? Salt and water. Now, which process we took to separate the salt and water? Yes, evaporation and condensation. By using these two methods, we separated salt from water. So what is evaporation? Evaporation is the process of conversion of liquid to vapor, whereas condensation is the process of converting vapor into liquid. In this example we saw the water is evaporated to form vapors, that is evaporation, and these vapors are again converted to liquid. This process is called as condensation. Okay, now you will have to do one small activity for me. Take a container and add water into it. Then add sugar and start stirring it. What happens? The sugar gets dissolved in the water. Once the sugar gets dissolved in your water, add some more sugar into it. Again keep stirring. It gets dissolved, right? Keep adding small quantity of sugar and stir well. At a point, you will notice that you will not be able to dissolve any more sugar. This solution where you cannot dissolve any more solute is called as saturated solution. What you have to do for me is, you have to tell me in the comment section that how many spoons of sugar you could dissolve in 1 glass of water. This is a very simple activity given to you. So now we know what is saturated solution. A solution is said to be saturated if it cannot dissolve more of the substance or solute in it. But we can dissolve more of the substance by heating the solution. We already saw by taking water and keep on adding sugar and stirring for one such point, we won't be able to dissolve any more sugar, and that solution is called as saturated solution. Let's take a quick recap on this lesson, separation of substances. First, we saw an example of separating tea leaves from liquid with the help of a strainer, that is separating a useful component from a non-useful component. Then we took a second example, that is churning curd to get butter or makhan and lassi. By continuous stirring of curd, what we get? Two useful components, that is makhan and lassi. We drink lassi and we eat makhan. Then in a third example, we saw how to separate grains from stalks of plant. Here we eat these grains, whereas we feed the stalks to animals. It is used as animal feed. Later, we saw about non-tasty food from tasty food. Here, we took a bowl of salad in which you start picking the veggies you don't like and eat rest of them. These are all the ways in which we separate one material from other material in our daily life. Then we saw why do we separate substances. We mainly separate substances for three reasons. One is to separate harmful substances from a mixture. Second, to separate non-useful substances from a mixture. And the third one is to separate two useful components if we want to use both of them. Then we saw different methods of separation. First method is hand picking. It is a separation method used to remove the unwanted or harmful substances from a mixture by using your hand. Can hand picking be used to separate all substances from a mixture? No. How did we realize it? We took an example of salt and sugar. Were you able to separate salt or sugar by hand picking method? No. Then we saw other methods of separation. Then we saw what is threshing. Threshing is a process used to separate grains from stalks. Then we saw what is winnowing. Winnowing is a method of separation used to separate heavier and lighter components of a mixture by wind or by blowing air. We took an example of a lady separating mixture of husk and grains. Then we saw what is sieving. Sieving is a simple technique for separating particles of different sizes. Then we learned about sedimentation. What is sedimentation? When the heavier component in a mixture settles after water is added to it, the process is called sedimentation. What is decantation? Decantation is the process of pouring out the clear upper liquid without disturbing the sediments. Then we learnt about what is filtration. Filtration is a method for separating an insoluble solid from a liquid by passing it through a medium, preferably filter paper. And the last method of separation which we saw was evaporation. The process of conversion of water into its vapor is called as evaporation. Under evaporation, we saw how salt is obtained from seawater. Later we saw how to separate a particular mixture using different methods of separation. We took an example of separating salt and sand mixture. We saw first sand is separated by the process of sedimentation and decantation or filtration. Later, salt is separated from water using the process of evaporation and condensation. Evaporation is a process of conversion of liquid to vapor, whereas condensation is a process of conversion of vapor to liquid. Then I asked you to perform one simple activity. And finally, we understood what a saturated solution is. A solution is said to be saturated if it cannot dissolve more of the substance or solute in it. With this, we have completed the chapter Separation of Substances. I hope you have understood this particular lesson, Separation of Substances. Please do subscribe to the channel and Kindle Kids Learning for the upcoming videos. Stay home, stay safe.